Now, institutions and DeFi ventures continue to show interest in stablecoins, and this week alone, Fidelity Investments has tested a stablecoin launch, while the Trump family, World Liberty Financial, has announced a stablecoin launch as well. The overall market cap for stablecoins rising to a record high of $235 billion this month, and this as large companies are increasingly integrating with the financial instruments to streamline the payments process. PayPal, Shopify, Stripe, and Visa among the names integrating with stablecoins to help reduce transaction costs as well as enable merchants to access crypto payments. Now, stablecoins are expected to accelerate amid a favorable regulatory environment. The Senate is working to advance legislation such as the GENUIS Act, while the House will have a full markup on the Stable Act next week. Meanwhile, Wyoming State is preparing a stablecoin launch in July, and the SEC recently approving the first yield-bearing stablecoin. Well, joining me this morning to discuss the rise of stablecoins is Pat White, co-founder and CEO of Bitwave. Pat, good morning, and thank you so much for joining me. So, with Fidelity testing a stablecoin launch while World Liberty Financial is entering the space, take us through institutional interest in the stablecoin market right now.
Yeah, stablecoins are I think a good way to think about them is that digital assets have been around for a very long time. And I'm sure you've reported on a lot of different use cases from NFTs to DeFi and across the board. Stablecoins are one of the actual killer applications for digital assets. It really is, if you think about that Excel moment that personal computers had that really rocketed them up, that is what stablecoins are, because it represents the movement of money across borders instantaneously for incredibly low fees, which is not something that exists today. Right now there's $170 trillion of B2B payments flow that flows around the world every single year, and that is the perfect place to actually look at where we could see stablecoin adoption across the board there. So everybody is getting into this board, and the great part about it is essentially for the companies that are looking to launch stablecoins, so the Fidelities of the world and folks like that. It really is an amazing business model because it can be thought of as pretty close to the business model of banks as they existed, but without necessarily the rehypothecation risk into loans. So what folks are doing are like Circle is a great example. They take deposits from a bunch of different folks. They turn that into an on-chain asset. They then put that to work in very risk-averse treasury assets. So T-bills, depository funds, money market funds, things like that. And as part of that, they're just getting 100% of that spread because right now, they're not, for the most part, the stablecoin issuers are not sharing any of that yield back. So if you can get 4% in a risk-free way out of your holdings, then you get to keep 100% of that money. You just alluded to it, and what is a major shift in the industry is yield-bearing stablecoins. So yield-bearing stablecoins will be this notion of a stablecoin that you can hold in your digital asset wallet, and as it sits there, it is actually earning interest that is being shared by the issuer of that stablecoin. So what we're going to see is a drive towards maximizing the amount that you can share with your partners, your customers, your users, and the application providers that build on top of your stablecoin, minimize and sort of a drive to a minimal amount that you can keep as an issuer of these stablecoins. So you're going to see just an enormous drive to get volume up. This is absolutely, from the issuer side of this is absolutely an incredibly high volume, low margins kind of play, because they're all going to be moving towards actually offering these yield-bearing stablecoins. Now, the great part about that is it's such a boon for consumers, because this is what stablecoins enable is the ability to move money from point A to point B, regardless of where those two locations are around the world instantaneously. And so you can see when you look at the foreign remittance markets or B2B payments into foreign countries, it is not uncommon for a payment into India to have a 10% take on it. So that is that when you send $1 to the US, only 90 cents gets to the bank account of the person in India. In LATAM, that could be as high as 30%. And so the friction that has been introduced by traditional banking systems has really created this enormous opportunity for an asset like stablecoins that moves entirely on top of and secondarily to traditional banking systems. And then there's just tons of companies like ourselves, coming up to support that, both around what we do, which is payments and bill payment software, but other folks that are doing the infrastructure around off-ramping in foreign currencies, off-ramping in different locations.
Yeah, and Pat, building on what you just said, here in the U.S., all eyes are on Washington, D.C. to see where legislation unfolds in the coming quarters, coming months, and coming years. So on the regulatory front, take us through stablecoin developments that we're watching on Capitol Hill as well as the SEC and the implications for this space.
Yeah. So there are three bills working their way through Congress right now as we speak. There's the GENIUS Act, the Stable Act, and then Maxine Waters of all people, which I wasn't expecting as I was researching, is also working on a bill. The main thrust of all three of them is to bring some sort of regulation. So right now, stable coins are essentially completely unregulated. That's not entirely true because there are current regulatory frameworks that apply to them, but for the most part, their reserve requirements are not explicit. So if you think about a bank who is doing lending off of their assets, they have reserve requirements. If they lend out 90% of their assets, they have to keep 10% around to pay out deposits. They also have backing behind the FDIC. So part of all of these bills involves bringing larger stablecoin issuers into the OCCs, which is the Office of the Currency Controller, the mix. Those are the guys who that's the agency that traditionally does regulate banks. So what you're seeing is the best way for me to think about stablecoins, I like to talk about stablecoins, is that you could think of them as competing with the dollar. That's not entirely true because the dollar that's out there, they're all backed by dollars and they're all denominated in dollars. What they really don't compete with directly is deposits into banks. So like if you think about where money will flow, you either have money sitting in a bank account, a money market fund, or what's going to happen is now money sitting in a stable coin, especially as that goes to yield bearing. So the direct competition between those is there. And that's why it makes sense that someone like the OCC would actually be responsible for regulation because they're the ones that are already looking at banking reserve requirements. So that's what they all share in common. The Stable Act and the Genius Act are pretty similar in the sense that they are basically both adding reserve requirements. They're both adding this notion of what kind of assets you can hold. The AICPA last week just released a actual guidance for how to report this on your financial statements. So a lot of the regulatory and compliance tools are coming together. The Waters Act is pretty similar. We'll see if this ever gets any legs. It's a little bit stricter. It adds additional regulation and says that folks like Sam Bankman-Fried are not allowed to be on the upper management of these stablecoin companies and things like that. So it's a little bit more strict. It had a little bit more of a regulatory hint to it. But I think that the current political climate will definitely lead towards, if not like the Genius Act and the Stables Act, but even potentially a watered down one.
Okay, Pat. Well, we are all out of time for today, but thank you so much for joining me and thank you for weighing in.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.